Yeah, so first of all, I want to say thank you for joining today. I'm kind of really excited to share more information about the project that we're working on. And I wanted to recognise that we've got lots of different organisations on the call today from kind of many different types of setting and different systems, and have probably come through different kind of recruitment methods to be involved today. So the pure purpose really is to try and clarify for everyone exactly what this project is about, what we're going to be focusing on, and how we can best, I guess, work together to drive this area of work around potentially using open data to support referrals into physical activity. So we hope that off the end of today's call, you'll have real clarity on, I guess, what it's for, if it's right for you, and how you could be involved. As I said, my name's Chris Norfield, so I lead in our digital work at London Sport, and then we've got Clean, who's our relationship manager. He's also on the call, and then we'll be hearing from Tim from the ODI and Nish from IMIN. So as I said, we will, any questions, pop them in the chat as we get going. For today's agenda, we'll do a kind of an introduction and context from me about the project, where it came from and what's going to be involved. We're going to have a talk from Tim, which is around an introduction to open data about sport and physical activity opportunities. As I said, Tim is from the Open Data Institute, who kind of work on the OpenActive community around open data. We've got Nish from IMIN, who'll be giving some example use cases and a particular offer around use of their API during this project period. Some clarity then on the opportunity for different systems to be involved and the next steps to do that. And then a bit at the end where we can look at an open floor for questions. So in terms of this project, it came from initially being kind of started by the Mayor of London and the GLA, and their interest in supporting social prescription and sport and physical activity opportunities. And so we came together with them and with Sport England, who have a particular focus around open data, to create a project that looked to learn and demonstrate how the creation and application of open data can be best put to use within a referral setting. So, for example, within a social prescription setting, to support people to find suitable physical, with the idea that if they're able to find those opportunities and continue those, then we'll start to get the other health and well-being benefits of being active. So I'm going to start by just talking about why London Sport are involved in this and who London Sport are. So London Sport, we're an active partnership. So we work with anyone who is working to help people become more active. So we worked a lot with local authorities, we work with physical activity providers, with charities, with housing associations, etc. And we've done a lot of work to build relationships and connect different stakeholders. And again, we think that this is a really good opportunity for us to play that role around social prescribing and other referral projects. So with social prescription in particular, we've been working for the last couple of years around developing some training for social prescribers and link workers. And that was really focused on training for link workers to have the confidence to raise physical activity as a potential issue for someone, the service user they're talking to, talk about physical activity, the amount of physical activity, their motivation for taking up physical activity, and start them to be able to have those conversations in those settings. Now, we've done that with the University of Kent. We've been delivering that for a number of different social prescription organisations in London, and then we're now actually sort of scaling that across the country. But we were very clear when we were doing that training that actually that was just the first step in terms of supporting someone to join an activity session or to become active themselves. We know that if we can raise the confidence and the ability of a link worker to have those conversations, actually then the next step is looking at how in those conversations do we help them find the right type of activity. So the right activity for that person, because our understanding of social prescription is all about making sure that you're finding something that is right and fits for that individual, and that individual is empowered to make this. And we felt that our experience in doing this kind of first step of training showed that there was then a bit of a gap in terms of what next. How do you help someone find a session that's right for them? Now, alongside that, we've also kind of been working quite closely with different physical activity providers. So from big leisure providers to regional activity providers who run lots of different activities, right down to those kind of community providers who are offering Tai Chi sessions in the local community centre. And we've been helping them around trying to both promote their activity and to support new people into their activity, particularly people who are currently less active, who maybe need a little bit of extra support to get started. And when we've been working with those physical activity providers, we, over the last few years, have started to think that the concept of open data has been potentially really helpful for them in bringing new people into their activities and in providing good quality, up-to-date information about the activity opportunities that are happening. And we've done some direct consumer work, which we'll touch on a bit later in one of the presentations, where we've been running campaigns to try and reach and support less active people. We've been using open data about the local physical activities to do that. We've been supporting those local physical activity providers to publish that information about their sessions. We think that we've got some good evidence that's shown that that has worked really well to help the end consumer find a session that's right for them and then actually attend that session. And what we think the good opportunity here is to bring those things together. So open data and social prescribing or referral settings where we have within those kind of settings key messengers. So people who are currently having the discussions with our key audiences of people who are less active, people who need a bit more support, people who would benefit from being more active. And we think that if we can bring together some of the stuff that we've learned from using open data within direct consumer campaigns, and we can perhaps use it to support the work that is already going on and the good kind of good development of systems that has happened to support those conversations as service users and link workers and social prescribers come together to try and find what's right for them. And for me, this project, the heart of it all comes down to about this thing around confidence. So for a service user, how do they have the confidence that a session that they may be looking at as a potential thing for them to attend, how do they know that that's right for them? How do they feel confident about what that experience will be like? How do they have confidence about knowing exactly what to wear, what to bring, all of those kind of key things that we know are issues for people who are starting to be active again after a long time, or maybe being active and they've had health concerns. For a link worker, a social prescriber, someone who is in a referral type position, how do they have the confidence about what the offer is within the market? What are the activities that are available? What is the quality of those? How may they be right for that person who's sitting in front of them and they're talking to? And for me, I think as we go through this whole project, the idea is that what can we do to increase the confidence that they may have in that process? And I guess reflecting on some of the stuff that we've heard from social prescribing services and systems is that the current method of doing that is kind of in terms of finding out what activities are happening and the information that is available for social prescribers and link workers relies quite often on a lot of information gathering, whether that's finding posters, leaflets, Google searches, something that needs to be done over a number of years to keep that data up to date. And also we've heard lots about people saying link workers simply aren't going to prescribe something that they haven't done themselves or they haven't seen themselves in action. There's a real kind of quality assurance element that we need to look at. And so for me, again, running through everything, how do we use open data potentially to support that? So for this project, we've got a relatively simple hypothesis that utilising open data about physical activity opportunities can help facilitate referrals into physical activity. And we've come up with 3 core elements to the project. We're at the start now, so we're looking at understanding context and need. So understanding what is currently happening and how could we potentially support that. Then we've got identifying potential solutions. So working with open data and different systems to identify how could we pull in open data, what are the key elements that we need to display or filter to make that work, and then test some solutions. Throughout this project, we've identified 3 main sort of stakeholder types. So we've got service users themselves. So for service users, we want to know how can open data support them to have a positive experience and find an activity that's right for them. For referral agencies and systems, it's around, I guess, building on existing processes. Can open data enhance the existing service offer? And then for those physical activity providers, we want to know kind of what are the conditions for those providers to publish open data in a format, and to help make sure that they can provide a positive experience for people who are attending those sessions. In terms of who we're looking to work with for this project, so we are predominantly funded by the GLA, Mayor of London. So we're looking to work with any referral service that's currently operating within London. We're out at the moment with an expression of interest for the services themselves to apply, or the public health or the PCNs, whoever's commissioning the service. That expression of interest is open at the moment. What we'll do is we'll put a link in the comments section and also afterwards to that expression of interest form in case you want to pass it on to any of the services that you work with. It was due to close today, but I think we're going to extend it to at least Monday to see if we pick up any more services who are interested. We're then interested in working with any system providers who do or could provide services for these referral services within London. So again, we're not at this point in time looking to kind of really filter down to just existing systems providers who work in London, because we wanted to give everyone the opportunity to, I guess, explore how you might work with us on this project. At the moment, we're quite open to what those types of solutions may be down the line. And in terms of the core elements of this project as we go forward, we've divided it into maybe 4 different stages. So stage 1, we are looking to work with a select number of referral services and systems to understand those existing referral processes into physical activity opportunities and seek input into how open data could support this. So we're going to have a research agency who are going to work with us to run this. We'll have the services that we've recruited, and we'll talk to systems, to service users and link workers. And then we also want to work with the systems during this period to really understand and get as much information as possible during this first period up to probably the end of January. Then we're going to work from February to April to work with a couple of systems to look at developing and testing different integrations of open data solutions in terms of filtering or how you show the information, or different kind of minimum viable products with those providers. We'd then be getting that kind of feedback again from those link workers or users, so that the people that we talked to at the start about the potential for this, let's see if the things that we've come up with, do they address those issues? Do they support them? Are they improvements on the service that was offered? And then we want to publish those findings and explore the kind of sustainable models for this. We're very clear that throughout this project, we need to understand if we're going to move towards integrating open data in some format, how do you make that sustainable? So that's the overall project in terms of work that's happening, and there's existing work around the research bit, around recruiting the referral services, and working with an advisory group around doing that. Today, we particularly want to talk about this kind of work stream with tech systems. So we had initially thought we would go out and do the research with service users and link workers, and then in January, come back and start talking to the systems and say, okay, how could we maybe develop an integration and look at a different solution that might work around using open data. But actually we felt rather than wait to that process, it would be valuable now to start the conversation and to look at whether we can do some initial evaluation of systems capability to integrate open data into your systems. So from November to January, today we'll talk about what that we've got available to help evaluate that capability and do a little bit of testing. And then for a limited number of systems, once we've gone through that process, once we've identified the different areas that we're working with and we've got the research, from February to April, we'll then have we've got some funding to support, I guess, the integration of open data and MVP development. So that's a quick overview in terms of the project and the different areas of work. Today, the key points we wanted to do was, 1, give you a basic intro to what we are talking about with data and about sport and physical activity opportunities. 2, then go on to explain the specific element of support that we want to make available for you during this kind of November to January period. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass over to Tim in a minute, unless there's any questions for clarification at this point.
Actually, we don't have any at the moment, Chris. So
cool. So what I'll do is I'll pass over to Tim from the Open Data Institute. He's going to talk about open data.
Okay, hi everyone. As Chris said, my name is Tim Hill. I'm the Data Standards and Technical Lead with the OpenActive project or initiative with work being done at the Open Data Institute. And I suppose to understand OpenActive, it probably helps to start with what the Open Data Institute does. It was founded about 8 years ago by Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the World Wide Web, to help, I think, realize his original vision the World Wide Web, which was to allow people to share information freely and for as many people as possible to benefit from data that was being shared. So the clue with what OpenActive is in the name, really. We are promoting open data to do with the activity sector. So OpenActive has existed as an initiative for about 4 or 5 years. And the idea is that we will help agents in the activity sector either open up their data and publish it, or to help them consume it and use that open data. So next slide, please, Chris. This is the open data or this is the data spectrum, which we use at the ODI quite a bit when we're talking about data. And you can see that it's a spectrum that is fairly self-explanatory. It runs from closed on the left-hand side to open on the right-hand side. So closed data is data that is properly closed, restricted, private information such as medical records and that kind of thing. Open data on the extreme other side is data that can and should be used by everyone, and where the benefits are freely available to be harvested by anyone who's interested, with, of course, some gradations in between. In a lot of sectors, and this is certainly true of the physical activity sector, there's a lot of data that is closed, that's in a data silo, so to speak. Not because it's necessarily closed or there's a good reason for it to be closed, but simply because of the evolution of the sector. So, typically you have lots and lots of organizations that all have their own relational databases, their own management systems. And the only way to really get data out of those systems is to publish them on that organization's website or whatever. Of course, this means that it's not really available for use by other people. And it could be that it's beneficial to have that out there more openly. For instance, if you're a leisure center or say somebody who runs a yoga class or something like that, of course, it's preferable to have as many people as possible aware of what your offering is. But if it's locked up inside a database and only really visible on your website, that information is hard to get a hold of for most people. So we're just working on moving the physical activity sector slowly more from the left-hand side of the spectrum, where it typically is for historical reasons, more over towards the right-hand side of the spectrum. And it's worth mentioning right now that we're not talking about personal data typically. We're typically talking about things like gym schedules, class schedules, and so on and so forth. I'll go into more detail about what model, but the important point now is it's not personal data. So questions about GDPR and things like that are typically of a relatively minor concern here. Chris, if you could just move on to the next slide. So what's the broader advantage of doing this? What's the point, I suppose, of opening up the data beyond the fact that the ODI is keen on open data? It's, of course, mostly a public health concern. We know that the population of the UK is under-exercised. We've got a very large sedentary population. That population is often a disadvantaged population because of demographics, because of income, and so on and so forth. And getting people more active and more happy to be active is very important for the long-term public health of the UK. This kind of inactivity has got huge costs for the NHS and for personal happiness and lifestyle, across the country. However, it's not easy to get people interested in getting active, and we're trying to remove as many barriers to that as possible. So Chris, move on. So we've got a model of change here, which has got 3 pillars leading up to changed behavior. I think they're pretty self-explanatory. So there's capability. Obviously, people have to be capable of undertaking physical activity. There need to be no obstacles. They need to have the time. They need to be physically able to undertake what's available to them. They need have the opportunity to undertake physical activities. If there's no leisure center near them, if there's no sponsored walks near them, or if any location they might exercise is very physically distant, of course, that forms a barrier to activity. And then finally, they need the motivation. They have to feel that this is something that they want to do and they want to undertake, and so on. And once you've got all three of those, then you've got a good chance of actually that person changing their behavior in a way that keeps them happy and keeps them fit. Next slide, please, Chris. We are focused very much, and we see our role as very much on the central pillar there of opportunities. Capability is something that would be normally addressed by, say, social workers or health workers. Motivation we would see is typically being addressed by, say, fitness campaigns, by commercial organizations that are interested in promoting physical activity. But the opportunities are where I think we can really shine because of this closed data problem that the sector has historically had. Next slide, please, Chris. As if you look at a comparable sector such as tourism, for instance, I think we're probably all familiar with just how easy it is to do something quite complicated, which is to book a flight somewhere far away, get a hotel room there, hire a car, whatever you need to do when you're on vacation. That's pretty simple to do through a pretty limited number of web portals, right, like Travelocity or Expedia. Pre-COVID, at least, it was very, very simple to get yourself a relatively cheap vacation that would be relatively complicated to organize, simply because all of the vendors in the area had their data aggregated and compiled by these websites. And so it was very, very easy to compare flights, enter your destination, start point, and do a complete scan of pretty much all the data available and work out the solution that was best for you. Very, very simple and a big success story in that sector. More recently, takeaways have gone through the same kind of data sharing kind of solution, where something like Just Eat or Uber Eats or something like that gives you a very clear selection of all of the restaurants that are in your area who are doing takeaway and so on and so forth. But the physical activity sector has been very different. So next slide, please, Chris. So assuming that you want to be active, even if you've got capability and motivation, opportunity data has been lacking. Typically, a lot of leisure centers and gyms operate off a membership model, and information about what they offer is largely open only to members. You'd have to hit a series of websites for all of these organizations in order to get a sense of what was available in your local area, and so on and so forth. So it wasn't easy to get a synoptic view of what was going on near you. And so, of course, unless your motivation was very, very high, typically we would see a drop off at that point, that if there's nothing coming to do, why not just stay home and watch Netflix or something. So that's the change that we're trying to use open data to effect, is open up the data and get us a full view of what's available so that people can move easily from being inactive to being active. Next slide, please, Chris. So this is how we would see the ecosystem working, really. We've got a fair number of data publishers who already publish open data with gyms and leisure operators like Fusion and Better, national governing bodies for sport like British Triathlon, the Lawn Tennis Association, and then more targeted organizations like Our Parks. All of them make available their schedules and their activities in real time, using open data feeds, and that's available to be harvested. So for instance, by systems like Elemental or Helium and so on and so forth. So we would see the value of open data as being, we've already got a lot of opportunities there, and we'd be hoping to open more up. Next slide, please, Chris. Just to give you a clearer sense of what we mean when we talk about activity data, the kinds of things that we model using our data model, predominantly events and sessions, which is to say sort of time slots where somebody teaches you how to do something or leads you in a class. So it will often be, yoga would be the kind of stereotypical example, but there's lots of these kinds of things like aerobics, boxercise, et cetera. Also, with the impact of COVID restrictions on gyms, it's now necessary to divide gym time into these kinds of slots as well. We've got facilities that you can book, things like badminton courts, tennis courts, pitches, that sort of thing. Leagues and ringers, if you're interested in playing on a local team, for a football team or rugby team, for instance. Courses, so martial arts courses, that manner of thing. Again, with the impact of COVID, we've added a lot of online classes, or rather, our providers have added a lot of online classes that we harvest. So the sort of Joe Wicks style experience of having somebody lead you through in your own home. And then also routes, so recreational trails, walking tours, and that kind of thing. So just various ways that you can get fit, predominantly focused on events, sessions, and facilities. The kinds of things that we capture about those items, time, so when the schedule is, how much it costs, where you have to go to actually participate, how many people can participate, and whether there's room left for you. Moving over to the right-hand side, there's some, I suppose, demographic information, such as gender restrictions and age ranges. So you can look for something that is predominantly for women or something that is aimed at children. Or actually conversely, a lot of the time, older people, 55 plus. Difficulty level, very important, particularly for people who are quite sedentary, to know that a course is going to be suitable for them, that if they're not going to be, thrown into the water to swim. And then there's a space for marketing information as well, like descriptions and images and so forth. So that's obviously the data model we use is more complex than this, but this captures and describes most of what the data models we use involve. Next slide, please, Chris. This is just a snapshot of part of our status page. Because one point that it's important to make clear is that we, the Open Data Institute, we, OpenActive, we are not a platform. We don't host data. We don't curate the data. All we do is provide the standards for people to open up their data and give them technical help to do so. And then we maintain a status page, which is really just a series of links. If you look down the left-hand side, you can see a number of organizations that publish open data. If you click on that link, that takes you to their data feed, and their data is harvested directly from them. So we're simply sort of providing the architecture that people can use to publish data, but the open data is published by the organizations themselves and is managed by them, and so on and so forth. Next slide, please, Chris.
Tim, just to start, I've got a question actually from Mo. Would you prefer to take a question afterwards or not?
Yeah, now it's fine.
Okay, I just thought it might be an easy one. Mo's just asking, what is an opportunity model?
Oh, that's it's a good question. Yes, I'll be delving into that a little bit more further on. Opportunity is kind of the big noun that we use to describe any chance anybody can have to undertake physical activity. So anything somebody can do basically is an opportunity. And the opportunity model is the formal vocabulary for how we describe those chances, those opportunities. So the model is things like schedule, price, time, place, that kind of thing. So what we're saying is, to fit the opportunity model, you have to have an offer for people to become physically active, and then you have to be able to describe it using those kinds of data points so that people have got enough information to take action on it. So that's the opportunity model, is what gets described and how we describe it. So
okay, that's brilliant. Probably, is that okay for you, Mo? If we say that perhaps if there are questions that will get lost if we don't try and answer them immediately, if you could ask them, and if there are other questions, perhaps we can leave them to the end. Is that the best way to do it, Tim? Or
yeah, it's tricky because it's technical, right? It is easy to lose people if they're not using the same vocabulary. So yeah, if there's clarification questions, I guess, yeah, let's please take those sort of as I go. And if there are broader questions, then if we could leave those to the end, that would be good.
Lovely, thanks.
Sorry, Chris, can you just go back a slide? Go or forward. Oh, okay. Sorry, my mistake. So We've got some organizations using open data, some of which should be familiar to you. The big campaigns like Change for Life and This Girl Can are powered. I can't remember if it's wholly or in part by open data, but anyway, open data plays a significant role there. Parasport uses our data, along with the Get Outside campaign from Ordnance Survey, MCR Active, which is Manchester's big activity campaign, and then commercial organizations like LucasAid and Decathlon also use open data. So we are fairly mature in this area. Next slide, please. And this is just an example of how our data gets used. Typically, it's used to power activity finders, so that you can enter, your location, your postcode, or whatever, what you're looking for, and then you'll get a view of everything that's available in your immediate area. Yeah, here obviously the person is looking for badminton courts near them, and this is the kind of interface that open data can support. Again, we're not a platform. We don't build that interface. It's on whoever wants to use the data to do that, but this is the kind of functionality that it can support. Next slide, please. So this is really just an expansion of the earlier slide showing how real-time timetables can be harvested from organizations that publish such data and can be integrated into systems that need to use or display this kind of data. It is also possible using our standards to make bookings. So if somebody sees that there's an opportunity that they like, or that is suitable for a client, it is possible using our standards to then make a booking and actually get the person onto that course. So it can be a two-way data flow. Next slide, please. So that was all the sort of large overview and motivation for OpenActive. The technical underpinnings of all this are really the OpenActive standards, which is really the descriptions of the models. What we do is vocabulary for data, and as long as the data fits that model, it can be read by anybody who's interested in open data and is expecting to consume that kind of data. We've got a kind of family of standards that all interlock with each other. The one that most people probably will not be interested in is the first one, the real-time page data exchange. If you're a developer, this is intensely interesting. If you're not a developer, this is incredibly boring. It's just how we manage the data transfer between systems. It's the protocol that's used to make sure that data in harvesting systems is kept up to date, is current, is accurate, and so on and so forth. So yeah, that's very much the plumbing of the system. The opportunity standard, I went into a little in response to Mo's question earlier. This is what we use to describe physical activity and the logistics of how you participated in. Part of the opportunity specification is an activity list. And this sounds kind of small. There's not much to the activity list. It's just a list of about, I think about 400 or 500 standard terms used for describing physical activity. So, all the different kinds of football, 5-a-side, 6-a-side, rugby union, rugby league, the different kinds of yoga, and so on and so forth. And it's just a controlled vocabulary of those names to standardize those names, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but actually, if you're trying to search for a physical activity, the fact that different organizers use different names for things or use very branded names like, puddle ducks for swimming or something can be incredibly difficult and can make it easy to miss opportunities that are actually suitable. So this standardized vocabulary makes sure that if you type in swimming, when you're making a search for swimming classes, you get, puddle ducks, you get fast lane swimming, you get diving, all of the things that are related to it that you might want to see are standardized enough so that you get everything that's relevant to you. We also have a work in progress on improving accessibility data because, of course, to anybody who has enhanced accessibility needs, it can be very, very important to know what kind of access there is in the facility that you're going to, what kind of support is available to you as a participant, and that kind of thing. And the sector as a whole, even where it does collect that kind of data, doesn't do so in any very systematic way, and often without a very informed view of the kind of information that people with disabilities need to have in order to both to feel welcome and also often just to actually participate physically. So we've been working on how to improve communication of that data, and I suspect this will be quite relevant to the social prescribing area for reasons I'll go into in just a moment, but that's a kind of evolving area. And then finally, there's our booking standard. So easing that path from finding something that you want to do to actually being able to do it, enrolling in it, and having a commitment to showing up there at a particular time and place. Next slide, please. Oh,
Tim, sorry, another quick question. Hopefully you'll feel comfortable taking this one. A question from Mo again. Does any of the data model use National Data Dictionary standards, e.g. SNOMED, if I'm saying that correctly, SNOMED?
No is the short answer. However, that is something, again, in relationship to accessibility, which we'll be looking at. SNOMED is very, very fine-grained, as a lot of data standards are, and we've found that often we just don't have that kind of precision in our data. It would be great to be able to get there, but at the moment the answer is no.
Okay, and Chris has just come in to say that that his organisation are working with the data to map it to SNOMED and have strong links with the NHS clinical terminology teams. So I don't know if that's something we want to pick up later or continue the conversation, the Q&A bit later.
Yeah, I'll come on a little bit to that in the remainder of the presentation, but then I suspect, yeah, it would be worth exploring more in conversation.
Okay, lovely, thank you.
Next slide, please, Chris. With regard to social prescribing, one active area right now is mapping from OpenActive standards to OpenReferral UK, which some of you might be familiar with. There's an organization called which has been working with OpenReferral, and they have worked to create and adapt the OpenReferral US standard to adapt to UK realities. And we have a schema for converting between our standards, or between our opportunity standards and OpenReferral UK. It looks pretty good. It's still a work in progress. There's a couple of points where you could map in more than one way, which for standards can be a problem. And it hasn't, I think, been thoroughly road tested, but we're certainly moving in that direction. And we also have some tooling developed for measuring how suitable data is for that kind of mapping, whether data that we have has got all the fields and all to make it useful in an OpenReferral UK context. So there is some convergence with social prescribing explicitly there. Next slide, please, Chris. And then the accessibility standard. As I said, this is also a work in progress. It is reasonably mature, though. It's been through consultation with Sport England, with the Activity Alliance, with Accomable, which is an organization which is now part of Airbnb, but that worked on making accessibility a concern when using Airbnb or when looking for accommodation. And there's a very blurry line between accessibility needs and other kinds of needs, like recuperative needs, for instance, and conceivably social prescribing needs. Right now, we've got a taxonomy for describing accessibility needs, which covers accessibility needs full stop, but then also edges into recuperative needs. It's a small taxonomy. It's got 20 or 30 terms in it right now, so it's very, very far from the complexity of something like SNOMED. But it's possible to imagine some kind of mapping or hierarchical taxonomy in which SNOMED categories get mapped to the existing accessibility controlled vocabulary. Or perhaps better, that we evolve the standard so that it can accommodate SNOMED. It's really about the kind of data that we've got access to right now. We'll be working to road test the accessibility standard in more detail with the physical activity sector at the start of next year. And if that goes well, and assuming that we don't need major changes to it, we'll be looking to move this up into a schema.org proposal in mid-2021. For those who aren't familiar with schema.org, it's it's a very loose standards body that recommends how everything should be described on the web. It's used by, say, Google and Bing, for instance, for search result ranking and snippet presentation. So if it were to become part of schema.org, it would be very influential indeed, and I suppose that would be an additional motivation for people to adopt the standard. But anyway, that's where our thinking is with accessibility, and it's certainly amenable to changing and reconsideration for the social prescribing use case. Next slide, please. So broadly speaking, our goals in the near and intermediate future for OpenActive in relation to social prescribing are, first of all, to raise the visibility of the social prescribing use case across the physical activity sector. Social prescribing has not been on the radar of the physical activity sector to a large extent, at least under that name. So there's often been a lot of concern about getting people who are relatively inactive more active, but the notion of social prescribing as a pathway for that, or as a label for that kind of activity, taken great hold. Going hand in hand, we want to make sure that our data is usable for social prescribing. I mentioned some tooling for rating that already. But again, with a bit of awareness raising across the industry, I think we can probably improve the amount of data and the kind of data gathering practices that would support social prescribing, and across a wider range of audiences as well. We want to make sure that accessibility information is there, that accommodation information is there, so that if, say, somebody is post-operative and needing support in that way, the kind of support they can expect gets described properly by data providers. And we also want to make that kind of data gathering easier for the kind of people who have to provide it. So overall, raising data standards across the sector and making it converge more with the social prescribing use case. That's where we're at right now. That's where we hope to be going. And I would look forward to an increased number of providers in the very near future providing the kind of data that would be useful for social prescribing. Thank you very much.
Tim,
Brilliant.
I've got one more. Sorry, Chris. Got one more question actually from Mo. I don't know if you can help with this one. How does all this map or converge with the Care Connect profile NHS Talk Before You Walk program? I don't know if you're aware of that, or whether Mo needs to come in to explain.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm not familiar with that, so we'd have to have a conversation there, I'm afraid.
Shall we do, let's do that one at the end, if we park that and then come back to that, and we can explore that a little bit further.
Okay, great, thanks.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks for that, Tim. I think the exciting thing for me is that, as Tim talked about in terms of the open data standards, is there are ongoing opportunities to feed in and influence those standards and work with the OpenActive community around that. And this, for me, is the benefit of this project is we have the opportunity to really gather, I guess, the voice from social prescription services, but more importantly from those users of those social prescription services, from people who are currently less active and who may want to be more active. We want to make sure that their voice is kind of heard and influencing the way that the data is standardized and the way the data can be used, so that it doesn't end up being a standard that is used a lot by people who want to book badminton courts and they're already active. We want to make sure that it's really fit for purpose. So I'm going to, sorry, yeah, go ahead, Tim.
Oh, yeah, so I just wanted to emphasize that. I should have emphasized that we are very much a community process. So it is about, evolving in hand with the people who are using it. Yeah.
Brilliant. So I'm going to pass to Nish from IMIN. So I'm going to stop presenting, and I think Nish should be able to take over the screen. And he's going to talk about what IMIN have been doing with open data, and particularly around what they're offering for as part of this project to help systems evaluate their capability. So Nish, I don't know if you're able to take over.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Great. Yes, I will try and take over now. Just before I do, so hi, I'm Nish from IMIN. The reason I'm slightly sitting in the dark is that we have a planned power cut here at the moment in rural Suffolk. So everything is off, and I have a portable power pack plugged into the router. So only the router has the power. We had a debate about that or the coffee machine, and the router just about won this morning. So luckily, so if this breaks halfway through, do shout. I'm sure we can figure it out. So yes, yep, from I'm in. So why are we presenting today? So well, actually, back in 2014, 2015, I'm in helped alongside London Sport and the ODI helped create OpenActive. And have been involved since, and we both kind of support the work of Tim and the ODI, as well as create technologies that help put data to work. So I guess hopefully what you've all got to so far is that there's a mass of data available about upcoming activities from across the UK, from lots of different feeds directly coming from activity providers. So they're opening up the data from their systems using those standards that Tim spoke about. And we want to put that data to work. Opening up that data is a means to an end. The end is getting that in front of a user in some useful way so that they're encouraged or motivated or whatever to be active. And user could be end user, could be link worker, could be whatever. So at its peak, OpenActive, sort of just pre-COVID, was probably around 50 to 60,000 activities available per week from across 20 to 30 different data feeds. Those data feeds are sort of various states of conformance with the standards, obviously in flux as well, which means that there's a challenge in terms of using that data, or a question, which absolutely, as Tim was saying, you can go direct to each of the data feeds, handle the data directly. That's the beauty of it being open. Anyone can use it for any purpose. Or one alternative is that we provide a managed service. So that's kind of Iman's core offer. And hopefully you can all see the screen, which is just our website, just a quick diagram to show where we fit in, where we're actually aggregating together all the different OpenActive feeds, cleaning them up, and I'll get into that later, but essentially providing a suite of stable, conformant APIs to developers and companies to build into their products. As represented by this rather cool looking chap with the cactus on his desk developing something. Key thing being here, I believe that OpenActive is great at removing barriers to getting the data. What we aim to be is a catalyst, because we want that data to be used in lots and lots of different ways. The real innovation here happens at this end of the diagram, with the users putting that data to use in interesting and useful ways, in as many ways as possible, to get the widest variety of people, link workers, service users, whatever, using that data to get active. And as Chris said, we're very good at the moment at helping someone who wants to find badminton sessions or courts find their badminton session or court and booking that thing. But we want to evolve that to meet the needs of those that probably need it the most, especially now more than ever. So that's why I think at the moment, Tim had a slide before with lots of different logos of companies using OpenActive data. The majority, if not all of those companies, use IMIN as a managed service to help them do that. And this might help some of the questions that came up before. So here's some examples of it in live. So this is Decathlon's, what they call it, Play. It's an activity finder. You can kind of see that these are all the upcoming sessions. These are all online sessions, I think. Well, given everything else is closed, it definitely is all the online sessions. And you can see you've got images, titles, type of activity, indoor, in-person, virtual, price. If we go into one of these, let's see if the internet works. There we go. Then we got a bit more of a description, the slots. And then I think the key thing here, and hopefully it came across in Tim's presentation, that this is live data from the systems. So flicking back to here, this is data coming directly from this provider system. Idea being that we're not asking them to duplicate that data, add it into another database, which creates fragmentation. We're saying we'll take it from your system, or rather keep up to date in your system, publish that data so that everyone can have access to the one source of truth. And this is why I think, even though we're talking about social prescribing and the need for assurance and checking and people being, link workers being comfortable with providers, it doesn't mean that this doesn't have a role. It just means that once there's an established trust there, we can remove some of the manual effort at a minimum of keeping up-to-date data coming through to being shown to service users or link workers. So do shout if there's any questions. I'm just going to go through some of these examples of how some organizations have done the UX side of this thing. So this is Decathlon's one, like a vertical search with some filters here. This is Get Active from London Sport. Let me hide the map. Easier. Again, this is just showing the virtual stuff. You can see there's kind of a primary search bar at the top showing the types of activities. This is activities from the activity list standard that Tim spoke about. So we know that if I search for something that's high level, dance, then I'm going to get all the different types of dance underneath it, not just ones categorized purely as dance. That's the way that activity list works. And then again, you've got the various different types of activity. Unlike Decathlon, London Sport use kind of a wider breadth of data sources available. So you've got a few more things here, like low impact fitness. There was a chair-based one here. It's probably refreshed. British blind sport. So there's a lot of stuff in here. And I think then the next challenge from a UX point of view is filtering. How do we make sure that we're showing what's relevant to users? Are users going to be overwhelmed with the number of results? Because often that is a detractor. So you've got some of the filters kind of shown here in terms of time. Like I said, this is live data. We know when the slots are available. We sometimes know the capacity of that slot. So when there's no spaces left, we don't have to show that session. Cost is a filter here. And then MCR Active is another one I'm going to flash up because it's got a few more filters. So this is their website. Again, vertical search here with different results. Interesting, actually, this one shows parks and spaces as well as sessions. So OpenActive does have a notion of a place where a thing is happening, and we can show place data with facilities within a place. So what was I showing here? Yeah, the filters. So in here you can, there's a few more things around the filtering. So different types of category, disability support. So I think this is what Tim was talking about in terms of accessibility. This is a very basic first attempt at how to categorize and help people select through different types of disability support options. This has been like this for the last 2 years, which is why it's so important we're helping to evolve this. And again, I think this is why it's really important for us to take the best path possible to getting the data into use as quickly and easily as we can, because that's how we're going to generate the most amount of input to evolve the standard. So those are some examples, just quickly flicking back to where we fit in. So what IMIN has is we have a technology here that helps make it easier to use the data. We already have most of the data feeds ingested. All those examples I showed you are using our API. So for example, in Get Active, if I did a search for yoga and hit search, that is hitting the IMIN APIs and coming back. So it's hitting the IMIN API saying, can I just have sessions for yoga? You know, if I put cost in or whatever, all the parameters go in, we return the filtered set of results. Then it gets displayed at the front end. So the front end is separate to us. And like I said, the key thing here is to get the data into use. So what we're suggesting here is that we want to kind of take commercials off the table as a concern and provide our platform for free for use for organizations, services, platforms as part of this group who are keen to help us develop insights into how we can use OpenActive data to help social prescribing pathways, as well as to evolve OpenActive to be better suited to handle these kind of use cases. So that's, I guess, where we're trying to fit in, which is, can we remove as many barriers as possible to helping platforms use OpenActive data so we can get these insights? Quickly, for those that are interested, our documentation is available at docs.imin.co. We can share that afterwards. And on here, you can see the kind of ways you can access the data through IMIN. At the highest level, it's a an events search API. So can I go into here? Anyway, it's all in. You can hit our API, say, can I have sessions from oh, it's not really relevant at the moment because of virtual, but from this radius, this geography, with this activity type, with this accessibility type, with this gender specificity, with this price, etc. And then we can return the results. That's both for events and for facilities. Facilities being a squash court, tennis court. How relevant that is to this use case to be explored. And then apart from the search API, we do have what we call our fire hose, which is rather than a search happening at the point of user hitting search and that hitting the IMIN API, you can use a feed from us of the data. So we can kind of put that data into your database. Then obviously you can manage the search at your end. Companies that work with us, we have companies using both either approach. Some organizations on this call already work with us. Again, some are using search, some are using Firehose. It just depends on what works best for you. And like I said, this is available for free as part of this project, so you can explore it, have a look. And if it is easier to go direct to the data because you just want to use one feed, or there's a reason you want to go direct, that's absolutely not a problem. I think that's supported. We're able to get to the point of insight around using OpenActive within social prescribing. I will very briefly talk about booking because I think that is an interesting potential part of social prescribing where prescription is made and someone's registered, booked into a session that's reported back. So as Tim mentioned in one of his slides, booking is a relatively new standard for OpenActive, and there are some bookable providers. We provide a sort of out-of-the-box white label booking interface, as well as the APIs that sit behind that. And we'd be really keen on exploring how that could fit within the social prescribing use case. So the booking APIs handle the kind of the payment, the PCI DSS compliance, the GDPR compliance, all that kind of stuff, to make it as easy as possible, again, for people to be using these within their platforms. I think that covered most things. Oh, I guess very quickly, the kind of stuff we do in the engine here is we're bringing in those 30 odd different feeds. We're making sure that they conform to the standard. If they don't, helping make those changes on our side if we can, so they can be used. And then essentially cleaning up. So sometimes from a provider's data feed, you will find things in there that you don't want users to see. And it just happens because human error or the way the database is set up. For example, as soon as the gym, for this most recent lockdown, there's a whole bunch of stuff in that data that became inaccurate, that wasn't updated in the systems. So we're kind of there making sure that, especially now that the data we get, we're checking and only passing through the stuff that's accurate and relevant. And then we can do some enhancements to that data. So for example, if we wanted to test out different ways of describing accessibility, let's say as part of this project, we can kind of do that centrally and then test it out with everyone who's working with the open data in one coordinated way. Or we can do things like image changing, description changing, that kind of stuff, essentially making the data as useful as possible for the different use cases that we're trying to solve. So I'll either pause there if there's no questions, or I'll stop there, depending on how the chat's looking, Rob.
Actually, Nish, yeah, we have got a couple of question and observation. Mo's asking, will there be a future cost after this is mature? I'm not sure if you want to come in, Mo, and what you mean by mature. If you do, please feel welcome.
Well, I can talk to the
high-level questions here. Nish, you were saying obviously working with you to develop it, but obviously my understanding is that around the table, nobody can work for free forever unless they're a registered charity and have other income. So I'm looking at it from a commercial perspective that people who use all these services will have to factor in, as a matter of fact, at some point, if they don't get, if you guys don't get sponsorship or whatever upstream, they're going to have to factor in some cost element. And if
Yes.
we go into contracts with our customers, then we leave ourselves wide open to, I guess, commercial suicide if costs come in on the other side.
Yes, that's a very good question. Although commercial suicide is an interesting phrase, but I'll explain. So yeah, absolutely. So I guess we're contributing in kind to this project. So we're actually not funded for this part at all. Our goal is to prove there's a business case here for the use of OpenActive within social prescribing, because even if you use the data directly, there will be a cost. Like I said, there's feeds that are there. There's feeds that will come. There's standards that will come. There's use cases that will evolve. So if you use OpenActive data, there will be an ongoing cost, as with any integration. And I think potentially more so with something like OpenActive, given its dynamic nature. With IMIN, so our usual commercial model is a license fee for those using our data. What we're trying to do here, like I said, is contribute to make this project give as many and as useful insights as possible for the time period we have, rather than spending that time integrating with lots of different fees and figuring out the nuances of it. It's putting it to work with users. Our APIs themselves, if you do work with us, are also OpenActive standardized. Idea being that for any of our customers, if you don't want to work with us anymore, or at the end of the project you can't afford to, or we decide we're not going to invest any longer in this thing, or whatever it is, whatever you build to integrate with IMIN can be reused to go directly to the data feeds. So our kind of plan is to make sure no one's building throwaway integrations. Yes, there will be some updates to do to go from an IMIN integration to a 30 different feed integration. But like I said, our APIs are standardized to the OpenActive standard. So you'll be switching from 1 to 30. You wouldn't be throwing away your whole integration. So like I said, if we can help you build a business case for using OpenActive within your service, as well as then looking at, doing your integration with us, will give you a view of how difficult or how costly it is to do the integration with 20 or 30 different feeds, or what value we provide by being in the middle. You'll then have all the pieces that you need at the end of the project, assuming there is value of using OpenActive data, to decide which route's best for you and your clients. So we don't want to lock people into using IMIN. There's no exclusivity. The data is open. You can use it directly. The tech you build to work with us is standardized. You should be able to reuse that. And I guess that's the most we can do to avoid this lock-in whilst improving, I guess, the outputs of the project. Hands up, we do want to ideally get commercial relationships at the end of the project, but we're not doing that through making people work with us, but doing that by making it free to begin with and then trying to prove value. So hopefully not suicidal.
From my point of view in terms of the project, I think one of the key outcomes of a project that has some funding for a limited amount of time, what I don't want to happen is that we run a project, we get to the end of it, and then we all say we used open data, it works a bit, but then we can't afford to kind of use it going forward. What we actually need to do is use this time to really understand, is there a business case for this? And if we're looking specifically at, say, the time taken, the resources taken to collate information about local activity opportunities, or the effectiveness of the referral process, if we can identify through doing this that if there is an opportunity or there's a case there, that this approach could, I guess, save money in the long run, it could be a worthwhile investment. That's what we'd like the outcome of the project to be, so that actually there is a life after this project, rather than it being just we fund something for a period of time and then all of the reliance goes back onto systems providers or commercial organizations to fund this themselves. We want to be able to prove the case through doing this.
Hopefully that clears that one up. I've also got an observation from Jade, actually, who's just saying that there are platforms that are already set up and are taking the IMIN feed that can be updated, refined to meet the social prescribing needs and offer solutions to referral schemes with a lot less development cost. So I don't know if anyone wants to respond to that as an observation.
Yeah, I think again, from my point of view, this project, we are open to whatever those solutions may be in whatever format and where they come from. So we're definitely keen to explore what we hear from the service users, the link workers, the existing referral services and systems, and what may kind of fall into that sort of that phase 2 bit, the bit I talked about, I guess from sort of February through to April, when we've got a chance to really explore different solutions and different systems that might work to do that.
I guess an observation is that if people are comfortable with all aspects, including the business aspects of how they operate at the moment, then clearly that's fine. But if people do see that there's potentially an opportunity here, then there's a shared interest to work together, isn't there? And that's up to the guys on the call to take a view on.
I think
so that's it.
So I just throw in also that I think using, doing one more integration with an existing system, of course, is always fairly trivial. But of course, if you want to do 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, that's when a standard becomes more useful. So I suppose I'd see OpenActive standards maybe as a long-term valuable thing to look at.
And Mike's just saying the IMIN offer seems generous to me, and as Nish says, people can always revert to taking each individual free feed from each provider if they wish.
So yeah, so on that, just in terms of that clarification from what we've heard from Tim, so there is support, there's documents, there's ways that you can take those feeds directly yourself into your systems through the OpenActive and the work that's there to support those. And then there's IMIN, where there is a direct, I guess, opportunity to take stuff through the API. Just to quickly jump in before then we go on to, I guess, a more open for questions. We didn't really mention the impact of COVID, just sort of in terms of this project. It was due to kick off back in March last year, or March this year, sorry. We had it on hold for a while. We've kicked it off again. We are aware that social prescription services and referral services potentially are under extra pressure at this point in time. We're also aware that actually local activities taking place at venues are currently not happening. When they do start to happen again, maybe happening less than they were before. So from the groups that we've spoken to and the advisory board, we've looked at certainly including online sessions within whatever we, I guess, come up with as, I guess, a key part of that. So that's something to be aware of. And we are aware that actually we need to be kind of respectful when we're trying to work with social prescription organisations and service users and link workers around this particular time, in terms of trying not to ask too much, I guess, when they may be focusing on the COVID response. So just to kind of recognise that we do that. And I think the key thing from me, as sort of some initial questions were, is this relevant to your kind of development plans or your clients' priorities? Is it something that you maybe kind of think is worth exploring a bit further with us? If so, then, as I said, there's this initial evaluation period, which is either we can kind of set up this opportunity to work with the IMIN API and get some technical support to evaluate your system's capacity and ability to integrate an open data flow, or to actually do that directly yourself. Again, support and technical support available from the OpenActive community to do that. This initial period is around evaluation, really understanding, can you bring in an open data feed? Can you represent that then within your system? The phase 2 bit is then what is the best, I guess, solution, or what are the best and most suitable ways of showing that data or filtering it, or saying actually it shows okay, but what we really need is quality assurance, or we need X from the activity providers. So it's those sort of 2 phases to this. Let's look now. If you're interested, we'll be doing a kind of initial survey that we'll send out next week, and we'd ask you to complete that, and that will help you to get access then to that sort of initial evaluation period. If you're in that initial evaluation period, then when we get to sort of the end of January, we'll be matching up what we found from that period with what we found from talking to services and service users and link workers, and trying to then identify a core, I guess, group of organisations and systems who will work with on that February to April period of doing some testing. And that was the only other thing around COVID, which I forgot to mention, was there is actually the deadline of June is a hard deadline because we're funded by the GLA, and due to the I guess the way that the GLA is elected, we have to complete the project by June. So we are in a much more compressed timeline than we initially thought we would be. But we think as long as we keep this scope really focused on, I guess, the elements that we talked about today, and that as long as we're kind of flexible in terms of how we work with you and the other systems, we hope we can do that. I want to open up now to any questions, and Keen, if you can pop them in the chat, and if Rob can maybe flag up some questions, and then if you want to either expand on the answer or we need further clarity, then please do unmute yourself and jump in.
Well, we've got an observation. Actually, we go to Hannah first. Hannah's asked, do you have any early thoughts on what the business model may be, or is that something that, you know, very definitely is going to be confirmed as we work through this?
Yeah, I'd say, I certainly haven't got any firm ideas on what that would be. I think we want to build in the idea that whatever solutions we're testing and research we're doing should aim to capture an answer to that question. From our very basic understanding of how we operate, as I mentioned, I think there is certainly an amount of time that is taken when you're setting up a referral service or a social prescription service to survey what are the opportunities to make those partnerships, to make sure that you have, I guess, ongoing access to good quality information about local opportunities. To me, it would seem that there's an opportunity if you are delivering a service where you perhaps are operating in multiple areas, if you were able to have a stream of good quality activities that were filterable and worked really well in terms of supporting your, I guess, link workers to find activities. If you could then switch that on for a number of different areas you're working in, then that would seem to me to potentially start to address some of the issues, and potentially, I guess, deliver some business return. But as I said, I'm keen that we make sure we capture those as a key outcome from this project.
Thanks for that, Chris. Jade sort of adds to that about the importance of looking into sustainable solutions. Moving down the questions, Matthew from the Healthy London Partnership is just mentioning that he's using the and they're using the IMIN feed at the moment and are finding it very useful. I don't know whether Matthew wants to comment on that, or Chris wants to reflect on that, or just leave that one and move on to another question. Chris,
maybe
just Matthew,
maybe just a quick plug for IMIN. I mean, we've done a very quick API integration, really quite easy to do. We're embedding this in general practice across 6 local authorities. We've done this really, really quickly. This is all about the UX, finding out what individuals, what link workers and others need to filter results. That really echoes the value of this research over the next few months. Look, we're funded centrally by DWP, NHS, NHSX, etc. You know, we're a not-for-profit model. So part of our contribution to the commercials around this is to offer free integration with, you know, great systems like SocialRx or Elemental, or, you know, other things on the call. You know, we do need to make this economic as well as effective. So really keen to support that process.
Thank you very much for that. Perhaps building on earlier comments that were made during Tim's presentation, is there any link with moving medicine? Because I don't actually know if there's anyone on the call who could answer this one. Maybe we can take it away, but Jade's a bit sort of confused as to how social prescribing and moving medicine works together. If people know that, that's the sort of Public Health England NHS initiative. Is that something we take away, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, my first comment, I guess, would be that, you know, if you go to Moving Medicine, you'll see a link to Change for Life, and Change for Life has been powered by OpenActive data. So I think Moving Medicine sort of positions itself above other organizations that are offering the activities, but then those organizations do in fact link to OpenActive data. So it's not a direct link, and maybe we can explore tying those things more closely together, but there is already a connection there.
Again, it's kind of like we found when we were doing training for link workers. You've got this first stage, which is the confidence, the ability, the resources to raise the issue of physical activity, to talk about how much activity someone should be doing, to support someone to have that conversation around why they might want to be more active. And again, that's where I feel that moving medicine sits in terms of giving GPs or link workers the resources and the tools to have that conversation. And then I think we are then on that sort of almost that next step, which is then how do you help someone find the right thing for them? And I guess empower them to take the next step to actually attend an activity.
Thank you very much. So is it worth going back to the either the Care Connect or the SNOMED conversations now for any observations, or should we take that away and come back?
I think the Care Connect one, it was whether there was any more information about that. I wasn't aware of what that was. The Talk Before You Walk program.
Sorry, it's Mo here. So what I'll do is I'll share it in the link. If you're presenting, you should be able to just click on the link. It's the NHS Digital API. I think it's in progress, and the vision is that NHS Connect will develop a single UK-wide API for all referrals to all things to all people. And it's obviously starting from the care side, moving across different boundaries. But there is it's almost like a Me Too. I kind of, from this presentation, I've heard a Me Too, and I've heard lots of Me Toos, and lots of people are doing lots of these things. But I guess eventually, because we're all kind of linked up to the government and so on, we're going to have to conform to the government standards at some point. A bit like SNOMED, and this is what this program's about. So I've just put it in the link. If people want to click on it, you'll get the API details.
Great, thanks.
Thank you very much. Got a comment. Thanks for putting that in, Mo. Got a comment. Just moving to it now. Well, we're just trying to keep up with all the different questions, actually. Just bear with me 1 second. Hannah makes the point that Better Point's already working with IMIN and are happy to explore collaboration with social prescribing platforms to provide a more complete solution that incorporates content, social prescribing systems, and incentivized behavior change. And Matthew, who was just came on the screen just now, is asking when can we see OpenActive SNOMED mappings as he and his organisation are doing something very similar. Anyone able to comment on that at all?
I mean, there isn't a mapping between SNOMED and OpenActive, and I think. I mean, I'd be interested in accommodating SNOMED within OpenActive, but when I think about our data sources, they tend to be, the actual activity providers. So these are not, medical personnel, and SNOMED, of course, is a very complicated vocabulary. So I think it's maybe important to emphasize that the data that we've got right now is really just about physical activities, and is curated by people who are focused on that domain. So we have that kind of narrow role, and it could be that we need subsequent data processing to make it useful for that more targeted kind of prescription approach. So it could be that it's actually OpenActive is the first step, or OpenActive data is the first step towards integrating this into a system, but there's subsequent processing that has to be done in order to make it rich enough to support a wider variety of use cases. There's a variety of solutions there I'd like to explore, but I think in the first instance, it's not that we're going to be pulling in easily mappable SNOMED data. Yeah.
Can I chip in something with respect to what the LGA has done with the Open Referral UK schema? And some people are looking into the possibility of mapping what we call circumstance to suitable types of service. So in the OpenActive context, I would see certain SNOMED conditions, like, maybe back problems or whatever, as being mapped to certain activities like Pilates. So I think it's a separate exercise really to say what medical conditions are relevant to what activity types. And that's probably beyond the scope of OpenActive, but would valuable output from someone looking at social prescribing.
Yeah, and indeed,
Thank you, Mike.
Moving medicine, they use a kind of controlled vocabulary that looks quite a bit actually like the existing OpenActive taxonomy. So there's a fair few floating around in there, and as you say, Mike, aligning those is a specialist kind of exercise. Yeah.
We've got some comments, a couple of similar comments from Nermit and Alison. Are there any estimated number of systems and or referrers that are intended to be part of the project? And also a related question, how will we determine which referral platforms might be in the initial pilot and research phase? Say anything about that, Chris?
Yeah, that makes sense. So we're out to like expressions of interest from the local services or the people who commission those services at the moment. Our initial view was that we would be working with kind of around 3 to 5 when we were initially looking at this pre-COVID. We think what we're going to do is expand it out in terms of this first phase and aim to work with again probably around 5, but open to a couple more if needed in terms of areas that want to be involved. So areas who can provide us with link workers, with service users to input into the research phase. For the tech kind of system work stream, we're open to as many as possible during this first evaluation phase to test and I guess understand the capability. And then what we'd aim to do is bring together those areas, the systems, and findings from that initial research in that kind of end of January phase before the phase 2, the February to April, in which case then no firm numbers, but I'd guess around 3, somewhere in or around that in terms of that we might be able to do in terms of developing solutions or MVPs or supporting, I guess, more in-depth integration. And I think that will really depend on which areas continue to evolve, the setup in terms of how many systems and the interest from those, and I guess what we find from the research. So there is a limited number of things that we'll be able to test, I guess, within this project. But I think that won't be determined until later on.
Thank you. We've got a question from Jade from the Exercise Movement and Dance Partnership, who of course provide a lot of the sessions that we might be of interest. Probably need to get SIMSPA involved referral standards in terms of their overview of the workforce related issues and qualifications, etc. Just one to take on board, I guess. Yeah. Denise said it's very positive and be delighted to test this, hopefully through some of our current social prescribing project customers in the London area. Tim, who's had a lot of experience of working in the GP and health sector, talks about moving medicine to have different elements, including active hospitals, great website, active conversations, blended learning courses, etc. So obviously some good overlaps there. Moving down, where are we? Yeah, Chris says it's this is a very important and interesting project, and hopefully link in with far wider objectives of social prescribing, population health as a whole, with admission or attendance prevention, and the NHS local authority savings realised in due course. Having already integrated with the API, I'm in API. We're happy to help anyone take this further. Then Alison's asking how we'll determine which referral platforms might be in this initial pilot research phase. Did you cover that, Chris, or are you able to say any more?
So this initial pilot referral platforms, we're open to any referral platforms, I guess, doing the trial either with IMIN or with OpenActive directly.
Okay, thank you. We've got a lot of questions. I'm aware of time, so speeding through them. Denise says Elemental are using SNOMED code through EMIS integration. Mo says agree, activity types can be mapped at the higher level of SNOMED quite easily. Oh, that's good, positive conversation. Alison, Priority are using SNOMED, HLT and read codes through System 1 EMIS and Vision integrations. I think there's a whole conversation to be had around there, so I won't continue on that, but great input, which we're grateful for, and some good connections being made. And Ashley from Versus Arthritis said we'd be very keen to support with the service users and research phase. We're developing our physical activity we're developing our physical activity offer and offer a wide range of physical activity services for people with musculoskeletal issues. So that's nice to link in with the rest of the earlier conversation as well. I think I've tried to cover most of the comments, if not all of the comments and questions there, Chris. So
yeah, brilliant. Thank you for that, Rob, and thank you to everyone for all your input today. That's been really helpful. As I said, we're following up with a survey with a couple of questions, I guess, about your systems and about your interest in being involved going forwards. But we'll also look at other ways that we can maybe continue this conversation, whether that's through a Slack channel or something, because I think there's certainly a lot that could be explored here. I think one of the key things that I'll probably come back to the group as a whole is to try and refine down some areas to focus on. Certainly for me, it came up around the, I guess, mapping fields, filtering SNOMED, to Open Referral, to OpenActive, an area around that feels really important. An area around that kind of business case, again, feels very important for us to look at. And I want to make sure that as we go through the project, we continue to keep the focus within a very kind of tightly focused scope, so that we don't end up trying to solve every problem and end up solving nothing. But I think, yeah, just to thank everyone today. Any other questions, please do send them through. And we will make sure that we keep in touch with everyone, and we look forward to working with you going forward. So thanks to presenters today, thanks to Rob for facilitating, thanks to you all for attending. Thanks.
Cheers, Chris. See you soon,
Bye,
everyone.
Thanks
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.